How you doing? It's Plasma here. So I want to talk about an article that somebody had sent me through onto Odyssey. It's about an operation that was conducted by our three-letter friends called Crimson Mist. This was a field test and a horrific experimental process that was tested out on the people of Rwanda in 1994, which directly contributed to their genocide. In fact, it was the entire purpose of this operation. An interesting article, and it seems to me like it was the first proper field test of this type of technology that they're unleashing on people at the same time. It ties into a few other movies as well. If you want to see some of the predictive programming that goes into a lot of the world around us. If you ever seen this movie, Jacob's Ladder, this was released, I think it was 1990 or something like that. I haven't really checked up on it. I'll stick a video to it down below, or a link anyway. It's about a military force from the Vietnam era that were given a rage-inducing drug compound that they ended up just turning on each other and ripping each other apart. It kind of reminds me quite a lot of the plot behind this here, certainly with the demonic influence and all that type of stuff at the same time. There's also that film that came out called 28 Days Later, which is directed by Danny Boyle. If you want to know what's happening in the world, his movies are probably the best way to, next to Stephen King's writing, these two are very much ingrained with this whole shit show that's happening as well at the same time, especially Stephen King. Danny Boyle seems to talk about the technology more, and he's of course the guy that directed the 2012 London Olympics, which is a very Masonic affair. He also wrote 28 Days Later, and 28 Days Later is all about that virus called Rage, which kicks people into a murderous rage, which, as we'll see here, is pretty much the same type of thing. But I think it was through electronic means of how this rage is going to be induced, a lot like you'll see from Stephen King's film Cell and book as well. Danny Boyle also directed the film Sunshine, and if you know what Bill Gates is up to currently, he's trying to spray all types of powders into the atmosphere in order to block out the sun, because why not, right? The film Sunshine is also quite a similar story, but it's in space and they're trying to reignite the sun because it's dying out. But I think it's still along the lines of predictive programming in the way that it's all about crops and growing food and oxygen as well at the same time. He also directed 5 episodes of Inspector Morse, which is a kind of a detective murder drama set in Oxford, and the 5 episodes he directed are all about Freemasonry, so that should kind of tell you about what type of guy he is. So to bring you up to Rwanda, this operation was called Crimson Mist, and the way it was done, there was the Prime Minister of the time, the President, his name was Habyarimana of Rwanda, and also on the plane was President Ntaryamira of Burundi, and most of their senior government officials were on the plane as well. Cannon fire ripped through their plane, and when the plane went down, different radio networks throughout Rwanda at the time, which were all implemented by the United Nations, they sent out all over the different music channels and everything else. They talked about how that the Tutsi tribe were actually responsible for the downing of this plane. The Tutsis were kind of the middle class of the era, and the Hutus were the main predominant group of people of the tribes, and they basically switched on. They augmented and fine-tuned and focused their rage towards the Tutsi people over the radio by saying to the Hutus and the Hutu listeners that the Tutsi people, who they were already kind of angry at due to societal differences, and they directed their rage directly towards the people themselves. So the Hutus started heading towards the Tutsi tribe with already feelings of, anger. And then what the 3-letter agencies of the United States did, they flew in and they flew over the top of the area with a low frequency modulated signal from the back of a Hercules C-130, and this induced a violent rage in the mobs that were already angry, that were heading towards the Tutsi people. So what they did was they made many passes over the country, and they would direct these energy weapons at them and induce a murderous state. So they used their anger already that they had installed through the radio and the radio stations from just normal communication methods and programs like Monarch or MK Ultra or the Stanford experiment, that type of stuff. So they got wound up psychologically first, and then they went physiological through using electromagnetic means and engineering, and then they augmented their brains at the time in order to induce a murderous rage. And this is why they call it crimson mist, because the red mist is in the air, right? Or you saw red. So very soon there was body parts flying up in the air and everywhere else, and a lot of the weapons that they had at the time as well had all come from Live Aid. So that's a lot of the machetes and the money kept behind from that was still old money that was left behind from places like Mogadishu, where Bob Geldof and Bono and co, both members of George Soros' Open Society and sit on the board, had pre-stockpiled all the weaponry there. And if you know the film Hotel Rwanda, they'll talk about, how brave the United Nations were in separating the people, etc. No, they weren't. The United Nations were the ground forces that were making sure that the operation runs smoothly. All of these radio stations and everyone else, they're all the same people as always. They're the scumbags behind them. And then corruption on a ground level, like we're seeing now with these so-called vaccines or experimental chemical biological agents, money and corruption has bought these people out. But the people on the ground here need to realise as well that they are also going to be taken out by these people. So if you are in a position where you've accepted money and you've accepted money in order to propagate this murderous mayhem and genocide that's happening in our countries, you should know that you're not going to be getting out of this unscathed. They are going to come for you as well, and the more you're pushing it and the more of us you're taking out, your chances of survival are actually diminishing. Your chances aren't going up by you continuing this mayhem and murder and genocide. Your ability to survive is actually going down, because it will be us that overturns this shit, and you are going to be on our list as well as theirs, I guess, because Nuremberg does await you. So as I've been telling to people when I was on a few of the streams the other day, be a better coward, because for your own self-preservation you should probably start speaking up. It's not my threat to you, that's just saying that that's the way of the world, and that's how things are always gone. Like, you're not going to get away with it. Like, there's no time limit on genocide. You're going to get caught, and you might be buying new golf clubs or, a new car or a new house now, but they're going to take it off your corpse, even if we're gone. Your people that have now commanded you and are paying your wages, the illegal company, because the governments aren't business anymore, or governments aren't actual governments anymore, they're incorporated, so they have no power or jurisdiction over Starbucks or anything like that. They're literally the same. So do you think Starbucks could get away with murdering people or murdering their customers? There's no difference. You have a company number, you work for a company, you are completely liable for murder and genocide, and you're going to get yours for it, basically. Doesn't matter who you are, it's going to come down from the top or it's going to come down from below. So you need to speak up there, because stuff like this is going to happen again. And we can see that this in Rwanda is a test bed for what they're going to perform on the rest of the world as well. I'll pull up this article here so I can talk you through a bit of it as well. Very good article. The Crimson Mist, electronic slaughter in Rwanda. It talks about the fact that although it was completely silent in operation, when you're just conducting it with electromagnetic signals, if you have people on the ground that are subjugated to this type of control, that aren't familiar with the technology behind it as well, like you see a lot of people are laughing about the magnetic injections that they've had now as well, and they're saying that, oh, I've been on part of 5G now, or oh, Bill Gates' chip is in me. Yeah, and just because it's outside the field of your grasp of science, it's not outside theirs, it's not outside of my grasp of it either. It is something brutal. I'm not sure, I don't think it's a chip. They're not chipping you, it's something a lot more nefarious. As I'm going with it, it's brain control. It's brain control systems and genetic augmentation. And you'll see with the amount of iron building up into people's systems and the fact that they're emitting an even stronger and stronger electromagnetic field, it is connected to 5G. It is. There's just no way it's not. So you need to expand your horizons if you think that what I'm saying is out there or outlandish, because the science is going to get a lot more heavy. Like, I know this is possible. I know it's all doable. I'll bring you through some of the equations of how it's done now as well, and I'll show you from an engineering perspective, a tulip growing perspective, that everything is correct. It's a very brutal article here. It has a lot of the severed heads, the decapitations, and you name it. It's very, very brutal. This one as well is kind of interesting because the way it's talking about it was done here is very different to how it's going to be done again, because here we're in a kill grid from the 5G network that's permanently in place, and it was saying here at the time, and because the technology wasn't quite there, you know, they couldn't have it in the smallest locations and the smallest spots to emit its signal, so they had to use a dish that was passing over from the back of a Hercules, a C-130. Now they can do it from a grid on the floor, so you don't need to fly over. It says here, it's important to note that the lethal trick was repeated hundreds of times by the C-130 Hercules. That's the Passover. So when they saw the Hutus coming in towards the Tutsis, they would fly over with the Hercules and direct the energy weapon out directly at the Hutus, which would induce that rage. And they were kept on passing over, you know. It says it was not classic mind control in the ultimate sense, where, you know, they could have the whole part of their brains conforming to whatever the people beaming this at them would do. It was more of a emotional response that they were gaining at the time, and it turns out that you could do this within 3 decimal places. You could match the wave of the brain frequency, and that's really not a lot. If you want to get into the finer subsystems of a human brain, you would be talking maybe 17 decimal points, but that's even still not a lot. It's a very, very easy to do frequency switch. It's really not, it's not hard at all. Like, it says that only could the C-130 go to work to gain the precise control of the rage frequency through several passes, but it seems like it could be switched on pretty much like a light switch, because once they already had that focus there of the people towards the Tutsis, and they had that already built in, they just needed that slight push over, and of course the more it was repeated and the more you would see other people engaged in murder sprees. It's mob rules then, right? And there's nothing more terrifying really than mobs. You can't reason with mobs, can you? Now, there's this woman I do want to bring you into in a second, Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher Boys, but I'll bring you through some of the engineering aspects of it now. It says here that the with extra low frequencies, I'll pull up this screen. ELF. That's the frequency there. Autograph, yeah. Okay, this is through modulating frequencies on a microwave level. Now, this was running at the time between, if you wanted to induce the anger in people, it was running at around 0.1 to 8 hertz, and that's a very, very, very low signal. And I have my drawing tablet here, so I'll bring you through some of the equations of how you would actually do this. So any people saying that are watching this and thinking, I do not know what I'm talking about or anything like that, let me show you that. Yeah, I do. But yeah, these people that you're watching this and telling me to trust the science, how about you trust the science? Right, this goes on through this here. Let me just call up a pen. Okay, this is called the antenna equation. This is C equals F lambda. Now what this means, if you're writing it out, if you want to, this is called the antenna equation or the wave equation. Now, C is the speed of light, and that is 3 by 10 to the power of 8 meters per second. Now, well, that should be a dot over actually. I should erase that. Sorry, that's my bad. Over to right for a divisional. That is correct, yeah. Right. Now, 3 by 10 to the power of 8 meters per second is the speed of light. Now, if you have F, that'll be your frequency that you insert. So here we have 0.1 to 30 megahertz, I think it was running at. Well, it wasn't even 30 megahertz, it was still a very low frequency. So, yeah, 0.1 to 8 hertz. So you put that range in here. And that goes to 0.8 hertz. Or to 8 hertz as well. Let's put in 0.1 to 8. So let's have F1 equal to 0.1 hertz. And F2, let's have that equal to 8 hertz. Now the way that you can see this will be conducted from using the antenna equation. Now lambda here, that means wavelength. So if you have a wave like this, it's being sent through the air, that would be your normal singular voltage or incline point. So that would be there. That's your amplitude. Let's call that time. And the x-axis, time, that'd be in seconds. So your wavelength here is the points of the crest that match an entire repetition through. So this point to this point, that'd be your wave frequency. I should have carried that one over there. That's your wavelength, and that also matches to your antenna size. So let me just erase that as well. Oops. I was looking at the Project Bluebeam yesterday. Just erase this. A smooth line video as I wanted it to be, but well, I'll give it like a live lecture. Lecture speed, that's what I'm giving it now. Okay. So those are that's your wavelength. That's your which assign lambda there. Now what this means is you can pretty much align it with what you would get from an antenna. So when you have your antenna in your house that's, you know, coming from your broadband and stuff like that, they're normally running at 2.8 gigahertz. 2.8. I'm not really used to this tablet. And you'll notice the very small size of it as well. And that's because the that's because the smaller the antenna is, the higher the frequency, and also the higher the frequency, the smaller antenna. And that's what this whole equation means. So if you're talking about the size of, when you're talking about the 0.1 hertz that's used to induce this range, so these are the type of frequencies that you get from things like the Earth, actually. Schumann resonance and stuff like that. They're very, very, very low frequencies, but as I was saying about the point that if you have the higher frequencies, then you need a smaller antenna. So, sorry, the higher frequency, you need a smaller antenna, and that also works in the inverse. If you're trying to gather the size of an antenna that you want to receive, from what this means here, the lambda, that means that if you want to solve this very quickly, it's just a matter of changing the variables over. So you have C, which is equal to 3 by 10 to the power of 8 meters per second. C equals F lambda. So lambda would be your frequency that you're attaining here. So you just plug that in, and you plug the C equals 3 by 10 to the power of 8 meters per second as well. So if you change that over and you change the variables, that's C divided by F is equal to lambda. And that would be your antenna length. So if you're looking at the crystals that are in people's noses and stuff like that, the way that they are so very small is because you can gather the main captured and attenuated signal through its frequency shift. So this would be the same here of if you want to take, so let's find out the size of the antenna to receive for that 0.1 or the 8 hertz. It's a very low signal. So it's just a matter of 3 by 10 power of 8. That's your meters per second speed of light, and you divide this by the frequency that you want. So if you want to induce a mentally changing frequency to somebody, let's put that 8 hertz underneath it. So that's the speed of light divided by the 8 hertz of the frequency. For controlling people, I'll just do a quick calculation of it here. Where is the where is that? Ah, yeah. 3 by 10 to the power of 8 divided by 8. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very big number. Okay. Yeah. Right. 37.5 million or 375. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, now that's the size of your antenna. If you want to induce that type of signal, that's in meters. That's a very, very big antenna. If you want to be able to obtain that type of frequency, as I was saying, it's a worldly size one, you know. Wait, 8 as well. Is that correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh no, 3 by 10 to the power of 8 by. Just double check my mathematics here. Seems 3 by 10 parallel divided by 8. It is right, yeah. I was worrying then. Thought I'd forgotten. That'd be brutal, wouldn't it? Maybe they are doing something to us. Yeah, that's the size of the antenna that you'd be having, which is it's a massive antenna, right? So if you want to actually be able to change this over to make it something portable, you will do something like this. Just erase that. If you want to be able to control people at the same time, and you also want to be able to attenuate the difference between the frequencies. So you might have 0.2, and it's set to 3 decimal places. So it might be 0.2223 might be your anger ratio, but then 0.2228 might be your happiness ratio. You want to have a finer control over all the subsystems of a person's brain as well from the frequency, which you can also attenuate. I'll put up these main equations here, and what you'll see now is if you want to adapt to be able to change these frequencies down in order to make it possible. So if you're saying it can't be possible because, as I'm saying, that it's physically impossible to get an antenna of that size, no, there's massive workarounds, and you can do this with frequency modulation. So we're not going to be using DC signals now. What we'll look at is how we'd use an AC signal to an AC sine wave in order to attenuate this function and bring it from a different size antenna into a more portable system, which brings it into the scope of becoming a possibility of the realm rather than being a sci-fi fantasy. So if you have this is how frequency modulation works. With a standard DC voltage, you have your wave, but it has no bottom section like this. So this is a voltage DC wave. If you have your line through like we just saw with the previous wave, it actually loses its bottom because there are no negatives in a wave of DC. It's called this is why I use things like rectifiers, full bridge rectifiers, or full rectification. And what you do is you invert the signal over from where these lower parts of the crest are, because this is how a normal DC spike will work. So you get these just little ripples coming through, but let's say there's no frequency to a DC. It's not an adaptive. It's nowhere near the capabilities of AC. AC is simply just a wave, basically. It's just a normal replication of a natural order of frequency. So if I bring this up here now, so this is an AC signal. This is how the signal will operate if you're trying to bombard people. This is going to be FM. This is a frequency modulated signal, and in order to send this, so this time instead of using time on the x-axis like we were using with DC signals, we're now going to make this into frequency. That's in hertz. This is called the Fourier domain, and this here would be your amplitude. That's in decibels and stuff like that. And the way that this works now, if you want to bring a lower frequency, if you're trying to obtain that 0.1 or the 0.8 hertz, this is now completely possible by you use something called a carrier wave. So let's put a big spike there. So this is now not a wave graph, this is a spike graph. So all these bars here at the bottom, like this, let's say that each of them is, I don't know, 10,000 kilohertz each or something like that. If you want to obtain a signal at the bottom, say here, So this, imagine this is the range frequency that you want to send, but otherwise you're going to have to use that 37.5 million, or sorry, 375 million frequency, but you don't have an antenna that's 375 million meters long. So, but you want to send this frequency into people's brains. And what you do is by using frequency modulation, you send this signal out. So this blue one is called a carrier wave, or that carrier. Let's call this the range wave. So you have these two different frequencies, and if they're operating at different forms, let's call them 10 hertz each, or etc. This one here then will have that, let's call it 8 hertz. That's 8 hertz. Now let's imagine that this carrier frequency is operating at, that you call that a lower sideband there as well. Let's say this frequency is operating at a much higher frequency as well at the same time. We can call that, say, well, the 5G towers go from, I think it's 100 hertz to, 100 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz, and some of them even more. So let's have a frequency, say, at 50 gigahertz. So let's say the frequency coming from it there is a 50 gigahertz frequency, which is incredibly high as well, by the way, compared to your microwave oven or something like that. It's a dangerously high-powered frequency, very, very dangerous. And the numbers for 50 gigahertz is 50 by 10 to the power of 6, 50 million, basically. So if you have these two signals now, so what you can do now, you send a first frequency here, and if I change this over, increase the size of that. Just have to erase this now. And now what I'll do is I'll sketch the wave for you so you can see how this can be carried in order to change the size of the antenna or the transmitter that you want to have to be able to make it possible to make a portabilized and localized version of your Rage machine. So now you have, this is going back into the wave diagrams now as well. So I'll draw here, this is amplitude, so that's the strength of the beam. It doesn't matter as much as frequency actually. And let's go back into time here for the X. That's time in seconds, and that's your amplitude. We'll call it decibels. That's normally used in radio frequency. Now, the way that this works now with the carrier beam, this will send, actually we can change that frequency. Yeah, let's change that to frequency. We'll have frequency on the y-axis. I think that'll be a better matching image when I'm describing the modulated signal. So let's have frequency here. Oops. That's your frequency in hertz. And that'll be at different points of the higher the frequency as the bar goes up. This is your time. Now the way that this beam would be sent, it kind of looks something like this. So if you have your signal in the center like this, if you're just sending a straight beam, like a singular tone, like a ooh. Now the difference is with frequency modulation, you're going to send another layered signature over the top of it. And what you'll end up with, so you have your higher frequency here, the C, compared to the Rage frequency. Now what you're going to do is, because that's too low frequency for the antenna for the Rage, because you have to have such a massive antenna, the frequency for the carrier is much, much, much smaller. So that's kind of, that would be maybe even the size of a fingernail or something like that. Incredibly tiny actually. So what you do is actually subtract them both. So you have your wave carrier here. Wave carrier is 50 gigahertz, and then you subtract the Rage, which is 8 hertz. It's very tiny actually. So wow, yeah, okay. So what you're doing is bring over the Rage frequency and you've shifted it over. I don't even need to really do much work into that. I thought I was going to be a lot more in depth, to be honest. It's not at all. So what you've done now is shifted this over, and I'll bring up the equations there in a second, the secondary wave ones. But you get this overlapping where you have your initial signal called the carrier, and that will be tied in with this now secondary repeated signal. So you have your, a monotone signal going or something like that, basically, and then the information that's coming through on a secondary wave that's being carried by the signal, that's why I call it a carrier wave, it's kind of piggybacked off the main signal. So it'd be, it's not just a singular pitch, it would be actually shifted with the rest of the wave as well. And it would look something like this. And it controls itself and packs itself very neatly in. And then you get two beams within one. And from this, you can do the antenna equation then, which will give you your actual antenna size. So you can still induce the rage in people, but you're carrying it with a secondary frequency. I'm doing all this just so people can know the actual scientific background of it and the engineering background of it, of how this is all possible. A bit bigger. Raise that. So there we have the antenna equation for if you wanted to weaponize rage carrying with a 50 hertz signal. So then we have the frequency total equal to the wave. Actually, no, I needed a bit more work on that as well there. So it was slightly incorrect earlier on. The wave equation you would use here is a of x to a cosine wt plus theta. That's the absolute power of the wave that you would plug in your frequencies with the wt. You negate the t because that's a time constant, but w is equal to 2 pi frequency. That gives you your angular frequency, which is used in this AC transmission block. It kind of moves in a circular method as well at the same time. So that F there is what you plug in. I brought it back into AC there, so that's how you get your signal. So if you have your rage frequency, so frequency rage carried by your angular momentum here, you'll get WR equal to 2 pi frequency rage, and then you have, to get your absolute total of the transmitted frequency, you end with FT is equal to, that's the angular momentum which we've just used here as W carrier. So the secondary one would be angular C equals 2 pi F carrier, and then you subtract from the carrier the rage frequency. That will give you your frequency of transmit, and that's how easy it is to do. You'll end up with a very, very small antenna, possibly about the size of a shoebox is what you would need it for, and you wouldn't actually need too much power. I'm thinking in a range of a couple of decibels maybe. It's not a lot. You can cook people with that as well, very easily. You can cook people. Yeah, many, many, many ways to die. I think when looking at waves this way, the best thing to do is not ask what can be done with it. The easiest thing to answer probably be what you can't do with it, and what you can't do with 0 to 300 gigahertz. I don't think there is anything you can't do, to be honest. Literally anything in the universe you could probably achieve with. You could actually, yeah, from 0 to 300 gigahertz. You name it, you could do it. If you wanna, if anyone's wants to ask me on something, you could pull out the most sci-fi stuff you've ever imagined, and ask me how you would achieve it with a wave in that frequency, and I'm probably going to tell you. I'll probably figure out how it'll be done. Yeah, you can do anything with 0 to 300 gigahertz. If you, no matter how sci-fi you want to go, you're going to get that. Let me pull up the equations here for you as well, in case you want to do some yourself. So that's how your carrier signals work. So you'll end up with your frequency of your antenna size has now gone from 375 meters. You've now gone down into the W total equals W carrier, take away W rage. So you're now looking at the you're going to be talking about this. So 300 gigahertz is equal to 3 by 10 to the 6 hertz. So 3 by 10 to the 6 divided by oops, actually I'll change that to 8. Yeah, if we bring it back to its antenna occasion, there's a speed of light 3 by 10 to the power of 8 meters per second, and this here, the 3 by 10 to the power of 6, that's your frequency of your 5G signal. So 300 gigahertz is 3 by 10 to the power of 6 then, and it's luckily quite a very similar number. 3 by 10 to the power of 6, that's in hertz, that's your meters per second. And yeah, very easily, basically, then you end up with 3 by 10 to the 2 in meters. And then you can use your half dipoles, and you can send quarter wave signals, and you can keep adapting it down as well. Pretty brutal. Yeah. Here's the just click on this here. I have a bunch of the angular equations as well. If you want to look over any of these, the angular modulation, the frequency modulation. So the modulation means when you hear FM, that means it's in the frequency domain compared to just the voltage domain. When you have AM radio, that means amplitude modulation. That means it's using just the strength or the volume. You know, the equivalent would be volume if you're talking electronic radio, and not containers or three-dimensional. The volume would be how much it dips. So if you have an AM radio you're listening to, you know, the way the signal starts to fade slightly. That's what you get with AM, amplitude modulated signals. But with an FM signal, you either get a good signal or you don't get a signal. FM means frequency modulation, so this is FM. So any of the signals that are coming from that are going to be taking over people or inducing rage, it's going to be an FM modulation, and most likely it's going to be what I've just talked about here, which is the angular modulation as well at the same time. And you can actually send, it goes quite in depth. I'll bring you back to this again, and I'll talk about the difference with the AC there as well. Because you could not only send the difference with AC and DC, you're not limited to sending one frequency either. You can send a batch, so it's not just the one you'd be bombarding people with. So the other benefit they would perceive as well from it at the same time is, depending on the batch that you've been given, whatever's in your system and what you're tuned to pick up from according to your antenna size. Sounds weird me saying that, doesn't it? You could actually control a different crowd according to what batch number they've had and that type of stuff. Because with an AC signal, everything is a wave. So if I keep drawing these, it's because this is physics. This is everything is about this. Literally everything is about this stuff. So if you have a signal here, let's say this is a happiness signal. Blue equals smile. There we go. So that's your happiness signal you're sending out to people. Let's have, this would be amplitude. That's your amplitude there. That'd be in your positive, that'd be in negative. And your x-axis, let's have that as time domain and seconds. So let's say the blue wave is happiness. You control it there. Now let's have red equal to anger. Now, see, the thing about using AC, you can get what's called polyphase. And just by having a slight offset, which is what we saw in the wave equation, I have x is equal to the amplitude cosine angular momentum by time plus theta. That t there is the offset. So that t, what this means here is, so if you have these little blocks of time, let's call them microseconds or something. It depends on where the wave starts with its crest. So if you have a different polyphase system, you can change what's called the electronic angle. So this wave would say, if it starts here, that means that this t would become 0.1 compared to the 0 point of the happiness wave. So then you could loop over and it looks something like this. And you can carry a secondary wave on the exact same wave. The only difference is time, because it means that they can overlap and pulse with each other as well at the same time. You could actually fine tune depending on whoever the receiver is of this signal. So depending on who has the antenna to receive it, because it has to be the same size, because you can't receive if it's an incorrectly attuned antenna. So you can't just use a big antenna for everything. It doesn't work like that. You have to actually catch the physical wave in the air. So you could actually send bursts of different patterns according to whoever has received different batch numbers on themselves, and that's how you would do it. Yeah. That's a bit of a boring lecture there, but that's just telling you, yeah, this is how waves work and wave equations work as well at the same time. Now, this is the really freaky. There's this woman here. Her name was Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, and she's from the Stanford Research Institute, an applied physicist, electronic engineer, and she's done a lot of studies in wave manipulation. She's wrote a book which I have to get a copy of, but it seems to be it's quite expensive, when as most academic books are, and I don't really exactly have 140 quid for a book right now, and you can't find PDFs of this stuff online, so I do want to get a copy of it. It's on her site here. I'll click that off. There we are. Here's our website. The official site of physicist, scientist, author, speaker, inventor, and humanitarian. Yeah, there's bullshit for you. If you have a look through a lot of her patents, she talks about being part of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. She's got quite a similar background to me. Yeah, linear accelerators and stuff like that. It's and the SRI as well. I used to have a lot of respect for the SRI. A lot of the stuff they used to do is very interesting. Remote viewing and stuff like that as well, actually. But she's also a member of the IEEE, which of course you're going to be if you're a electronic engineer. But she was part of this program as well, and she's a very much a person that's pushing this through at the moment. And some of her recent books and patents have been towards the controlling of people through electromagnetic waves, and she holds a lot of patents in it as well. And just to finish off this talk anyway, hopefully I'm not all over the place with it, and I've kind of talked about how things are done. She has a quote here that I'll leave you with now, and let's see if this sounds familiar. She said this as she was creating a lot of the radio technology that we're seeing now. Give me the money and 3 months, and I'll be able to affect the behaviour of 80% of the people of this town without their knowing it. I can make them happy, or at least they'll think they're happy, or aggressive. Now, where have we heard that before? You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Anyway, that's how you induce rage with radio. I need to carry on working with it myself there, so thank you for the subscribers. Need more. Sounds brutal, but yeah. I'll show you what I basically need to get a hold of here, because I'm trying to find the way. Well, I'm trying to find a way to stop it as well, because if you can bombard what's called a mutually inductive field, you might be able to stop a lot of this stuff from actually affecting you or other people at the same time. Countermeasures, basically, electronic countermeasures. Here's the site here, and I'll show you what I'm. So I do thank my people have subscribed very much. As it goes through monthly though, so it's all the coffees you guys have bought me. So if you're thinking that I'm holding back or anything, or I'm not going for it, it comes through monthly, basically, through buying me a coffee and stuff like that. But I have to get a bulk basically before I can buy this stuff. So I'm not going to abandon you guys or anything. It's I just broke basically, and it's kind of horrible me having to say. This is what I'm trying to get anyway. I'm trying to save for these. These are called HackRFs, and the guy that created these, it's for about wave manipulation. So, and radios basically, it's about how you can manipulate sine waves to hack pretty much everything. But they're called HackRF1s. The thing is, these can only transmit at once, or they can only receive at once. These go up to 6 gigahertz, but because they can only send or receive at the same time. I need two of them because they're not full, what's called full duplex. Because if there's full duplex, you could beam and you could receive at the same time. And what I'm going to do with a lot of this technology they've unleashed on us in the stuff in the masks, the vaccines, and the swabs, I need to beam a signal at it, and I need another one that can receive the signal as well at the same time. So I'm going to send a wave at it like I've just showed you in these equations, and I'll have the oscilloscopes, I have all the other equipment, I have all the other kick-ass stuff that I need. And these aren't exactly, well, they're not exactly too expensive either. It's just that I'm broke. Otherwise, I'd have bought all this stuff and I'd be putting the videos out myself. But I'm in a tight place. Yeah, I have a lab. Literally, I have a lab, and I'll pull out the most thorough research I've ever done. Because I have to, because this needs to be done. But you can't with just one of them. It's not full duplex. You can only transmit or receive at the same time, and you can't be quick enough to. Oh, it's light speed. You can't quickly change over for it. So you need to have one on that's monitoring, and as I send a signal at it, I'm going to calculate the size of the antennas that they're using at the same time, and I'm going to detect the signals that's coming off it through an RFID, and then I'm going to see if I can do it, make anything interesting happen as well at the same time. And that's why I'm trying to get a hold of a decent microscope for it as well. So it's just going in the bank and trying to save away for it, but it's very hard to at the moment. As I said, I'm not a drifter, and I don't want you to. I don't want to sell you collagen or anything like that. This needs to be done, and I've just talked you through what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to do that. Anyway, yeah. Murderous Rage. Take it easy on Plasma.